The Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral, Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC, is a very promising sub-regional organization in South and Southeast Asia. We look forward to an excellent discussion on an extremely relevant agenda. The theme of this conference has been conceived and curated by Mr. Soham Das, Chairman and Director, Tillotoma Foundation. Let me, on behalf of Tillotoma Foundation, thank and congratulate all the distinguished speakers of today's international conference. I especially thank Admiral Professor Jayant, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, for being with us today. In order to make the conference more comprehensive, we have partnered with a think tank from Nepal, an important BIMSTEC country, Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. They have been very helpful. We look forward to such partnerships with think tanks from other BIMSTEC countries. हजुरहरुलाई स्वागत छ यो आजको कन्फरेन्समा। भविष्यमा पनि हामी नाइससँग मिलेर धेरै यस्तो कन्फरेन्सहरु प्रस्तुत गर्न चाहन्छौं। तिलोत्तमा फाउन्डेसन ग्लोबली कन्फरेन्सेसहरु कन्डक्ट गर्छ अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय विषयहरु लिएर। हाम्रो यस्तो प्रोग्राम्समा हजुरहरु पनि भाग लिन सक्नुहुन्छ। Let me now request the Research Director of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, to deliver the welcome remarks.
Thank you, Yukta. Chair of the session, Ambassador Dr. Gauri Shankar Gupta, Admiral Dr. Jayant, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, Ambassador Dr. Shambhu Simkhada, former Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Nepal to UN, and Member and Chair, Academic Subcommittee, Infrastructure Development Committee of National Defense University, Nepal, Mr. Yu Lahai Chao Gon, Member of Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Dr. Jirayudh Sinthupan, Director of South Asian Studies, Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand, Dr. Niloy Ranjan Biswas, Associate Professor, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka, Professor Lipi, Ghosh, Professor and Director, Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies, University of Calcutta, academicians, experts, friends from media, and dear participants. Namaste and a very good afternoon. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you at International Conference on BIMSTEC and Sub-Region Politics in Post-COVID-19 era, Relevance and Emerging Trends, jointly organized by Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement and Tillotoma Foundation. I, on behalf of NICE and Tillotoma Foundation, would like to thank you all for your kind presence and valuable time. I'm sure we'll benefit from your remarks. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank which believes in freedom, democracy, and world free from conflict. We envision a world where sources of insecurity are identified and understood, conflicts are prevented or resolved, and peace is advocated. NICE has 4 research centers: China Studies, Neighborhood Studies, Non-Traditional Security Studies, and Defense and Security Studies. And we also have 4 major research topics like global governance, sustainable development and smart cities, Indo-Pacific affairs, climate change and energy, disaster management, international economy and development, China's Belt and Road Initiative, refugee and migration, border and transboundary water politics. In last 4 months, NICE has published 180 articles. Most of them are India, China, regionalism as SAARC, BIMSTEC, and Indo-Pacific affairs. We have organized 73 events where we have invited around 700 scholars to talk on issues of contemporary issues. We have also hosted leaders like former Nepalese Prime Minister Madhav Kumar Nepal, current Foreign Minister of Nepal, Mr. Pradeep Gewali, former Deputy PM and Foreign Minister of New Zealand, Sir Donald Charles Mackinnon, State Minister of Education of Maldives, Dr. Abdullah Rashid Ahmed, Education Minister of Nepal, Mr. Giriraj Mani Pokhrel, and some of the great thinkers like Professor Noam Chomsky, Professor John J. Mearsheimer, renowned diplomats, academicians, and policymakers like Kishore Mahwani, Professor C. Raja Mohan, Nirupma Rao, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, Admiral Jayant, whom we are hosting today as well, Dr. Ashley J. Tellis, Admiral Yoji Koda, Japanese Maritime Defense Force, and many others. We have also organized joint webinars with great institutions like Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, Center for South Asian Studies, Fudan University, China, Jawaharlal Nehru University of New Delhi, and several other think tanks, universities, and foundations. Today, we are jointly hosting this program with Tillotoma Foundation, which is led by very active and dynamic youth of India, and we are really impressed by their work. I would like to request Yukta to talk more about the organization during the vote of thanks. At the same time, when SARC is in coma or is inactive, people in the region have great hopes for BIMSTEC. It is important. Its importance was strongly felt since the eruption of COVID-19. BIMSTEC provides lots of opportunity for Nepal as it opens Nepal's door to Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean region. It is also an ideal platform to provide greater visibility to Nepal in the Indo-Pacific region. However, BIMSTEC has lots of challenges as the member countries of both the regional framework. Are least integrated in terms of trade, connectivity, and cooperation, and their progress is at a snail pace. BIMSTEC took 17 years to come up with a permanent secretariat and has failed to come up with the BIMSTEC charter in last 2 decades. BIMSTEC faced several non-traditional security threats such as trafficking of narcotics, weapons, and people, the illegal exploitation of natural resources, refugee crisis, emergence of rebel insurgencies and terrorist groups, and natural disaster. So in this way, I think it's very challenging, and I think it's the right time to talk on it. That's why we have invited this distinguished panel to talk on this topic today. I'm sure we are going to immensely benefit from today's deliberation by distinguished panelists from all the member countries. Once again, I would like to welcome you all at this international conference on BIMSTEC and sub-regional politics in post-COVID era, relevance and emerging trends. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me now request Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, former Indian Ambassador and High Commissioner and Distinguished Advisor to Tillotoma Foundation, to kindly deliver his address and take the discussion forward as the chair.
Thank you very much, Yukta. I am delighted to be here with a galaxy of scholars from Nepal, from Sri Lanka, from Myanmar, from Thailand, from India. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be associated with this conference. I must thank Tillotoma Foundation and NICE both for putting forward this wonderful idea and to have very erudite and very scholarly debate on the ongoing happenings in this great organization. So I would like to just give a very brief overview before we begin our discussion and before we begin the presentation by scholars and then the discussion. The Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation actually started in 1997 with 4 nations, then slowly it was built up, and today it has 7 member nations, that is Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Nepal, and Bhutan. This actually is a very big bridge between what we call South Asia and Southeast Asia. This is also a bridge between SARC and ASEAN. So this organization has a very important role to play to join or to coordinate between 2 different regions of the world. It is also home to approximately 1.5 billion people, and which is approximately 22% of the global population, and global GDP of about $2.8 trillion US. So this is not a small organization in terms of population as well as in economic impact. The 5th summit of BIMSTEC is scheduled to be held in Sri Lanka sometime this year. It was scheduled for this month, but obviously due to COVID, it has been postponed, but I'm sure it will take place very soon in the coming months. And that will provide a new fillip to the activities of the organization. I have seen that there are a variety of sectors which the organization is engaged with. They started with, of course, trade, technology, energy, transport, and tourism. But then they added many more sectors, such as agriculture, public health, poverty, alleviation, counter-terrorism, environment and climate change, and people-to-people contact. So the organization has many connectivity projects. There's Kaladam multi-modal project linking India and Myanmar. There's Asian Trilateral Highway connecting India and Thailand through Myanmar. And then, of course, there is a what we call agreement for seamless flow of passengers and cargo traffic, that is between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. Now, this is a platform which also provides a very important contact points of the ancient cultural and civilizational values which we shared with all these countries. All these countries are part of those values, whether it is the Hindu civilization, the Buddhist values, the Islamic values. All these are interconnected in this forum, and that provides a fantastic what you call
Others, please mute your audios. The ones who are not speaking, please.
If they can mute the audios, I think that would be fantastic.
Yes.
I was just telling about the free trade area, which is a proposal to have free trade in all the 7 countries. Then, of course, improve connectivity in all the 7, and improve what we call tourism and cultural links. All these are headed by different committees. These committees are headed by different countries. They are very senior diplomats and senior experts who are heading these committees. I was told that there is reasonably good progress in each of these areas of cooperation. But of course, there are problems. There are problems which we are facing today, and the problems because of the COVID, which is becoming a pandemic, which is actually affecting each and every individual in all the countries. The economies are for a toss. The social system are falling apart. The medical infrastructure is facing the greatest challenge of our time. There are many other problems as well. Then we have, of course, the problem of refugees. We have problem of terror groups in the region. But I think we will listen on all these issues from the distinguished scholars who are present with us today. So I will not like to take more time to introduce the organization. I would in fact like to listen and educate myself from the views of the scholars who are present today and who will make very profound statements. So to start with, I would like to invite Admiral Dr. Jayant Colombage, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka. I believe Dr. Jayant Colombage has a very close relation with Tillotoma Foundation. They have been cooperating in many areas, and I'm delighted to have him here. And of course, I don't know whether I have met him personally, but I have met some high commissioners of Sri Lanka in Delhi, and I have great, what you call fond relationship between with all of them. So I would like to welcome you, sir, and would like to hear your presentation now. Thank you. Dr. Jayant Colombage, you can put on your audio and start your presentation, sir.
Dr. Jayant is not here at the moment. I think we can start by inviting the second speaker first. He'll join us soon.
Okay. So till Dr. Jayant Colombage come and join us, let us listen to the views of Mr. Lampal Jugon, member Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies. I believe Dr. Lampal Jugon is a very scholarly gentleman, and we are looking forward to his presentation. Kindly make your presentation now. Thank you. Dr. Jirayudh Sinthupan, Director, South Asian Studies Center, Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. I would like to request you to kindly make your presentation. We are all waiting to listen to your scholarly views on the subject of BIMSTEC and sub-regional politics in the post-COVID era. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. And also, thank you for the organizers for inviting me here. First of all, I would like to point out about the effect of the COVID-19's that what it has done to our societies and what has it revealed to us, which I would term that the COVID-19 has revealed to us our original sins, the things that has been hiding under the carpet, but because of the COVID-19, it's just re-emerged and show us the vulnerabilities of our societies. One of the original sins that Thailand has to come to term is that the inequalities and also the unreadiness of how it will react to such a threat of the pandemics, and also the threat of the disruptions of the supply chains and also the disruptions of its economy. So I think that's that. I think that is the things that all the countries has also encountered, has also coming to find the ways to coming to terms with the original sins that each country has. And the second point that I would like to make is that the COVID-19 has such a huge impact on our socio-cultural shift, and so never before that the Thai economy has almost negative growth, and also our society that has to adopt a new way of working and of living, which is the growth. Well, we can see the growth of digital platforms and also digital economies, and for that point, as a standpoint of Thailand, and I think the rest of the world, is that we are taking more focus on sustainable development and sustainable growth, and there have been a talk on how we are going to reposition ourselves in terms of our economies and in terms of our relations to the world. And from that point, the idea of of sub-regionals and also regional cooperations has come into prominence. Now, I think since COVID-19, we have seen that the global supply chains and the global economy has simply collapsed, and we cannot rely on international trades and also international visitors. Considering that the Thai economy is 20% relying on tourism, so that is reasons why Thailand has to find a way to restructuring its economy. And from that point, we have taken part in a research consortiums in Thailand that we are looking at the new world orders, and also in the new world orders and after COVID-19 with special focus on diminishing powers of the United States, and also the rising power of China. Now, even though in many countries we are trying to say that we try to depend less on China, but we have found that it's very difficult to not depend on China, because in the recent studies about the Indian and China import and exports, and it's quite astonishing that to find out that considering that India is such a world power on pharmaceuticals industries, but what the world has found out is that most of its starting chemical components comes from China. Which means that we cannot, even though we're trying to depend less on China, but in reality we cannot. So that is why Thailand has tried to find a way to diversify its supply chain and also its market. And that is why, we are paying more attention to the CLMV country, which is kind of Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Thailand, and also pay more interest on the BIMSTEC. And I have to say, the BIMSTEC has always been the focus of Thailand in terms of finding an alternatives to regional corporations, whether in short terms or long terms. Which when we come to that point, I think in the long terms, what Thailand wants to push forwards for the sub-regional corporations like the BIMSTEC or the CLMV is try to find a way to diversify trades among the member countries, and also to find a way to create a sort of a system for human securities within the regions. Whether in terms of food, whether in terms of food securities, economic security, or health securities, because one of the things that we found out is that even though at the moment we are in the policies of a closed border, but in reality, it's very difficult to maintain a closed borders for in the long terms. So there have been a talk that instead of trying to just focusing on building a health securities just for Thailand, but we should think about a way to build a better health securities among our neighbors, which means CLMV countries, and also in the BIMSTEC. And secondly, in terms of trades, I think what Thailand, I think what what we as the member state and they should be focusing is on how to increase the trade and also increase the supply, the dependency of supply chains within the member states of BIMSTEC and CLMV more, which will help us to become more self-reliant. And when I'm talking about self-reliance, I'm not talking about just a nation state, but I'm talking in terms of in terms of international cooperation frameworks like the BIMSTECs and also the ASEAN and the CLMV, because as we can see that we cannot rely on the so-called superpower like the European Union or the United States, like we had before. And in short terms, I think that what the countries within the BIMSTECs and also in CLMV has to work together is to find vaccines for COVID-19, because it's going to take a long while, and it's going to be a very difficult situations for a low-income country or even middle-income countries like Thailand to get the vaccine just in time to allow its economies, to allow its borders to open again. And each country cannot work alone on this. I think all the middle incomes and low income countries south to south and has to come together and create a consortiums that for a consortiums to allow us to be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies and to negotiate with the vaccine developers to in order to find accessible vaccinations for our populations. Yes, and I think that is my point for now. And also I think the BIMSTECs and also the CLMV country has to focus more on the sustainable development goals, because from my opinions, since the COVID-19, I'm beginning to see SDGs not just an index of development, but I began to see SDGs as a way out of our original sins. For instance, how are we going to be remove inequalities from our society? How are we going to create more prosperities, more innovations, and develop our education together? And also how the members of BIMSTEC countries can come together to create good workplace, and also create a way to secure a responsible consumptions and productions of goods together, because I think that that is the futures of our regions and our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jirayudh Sinthupan. You have really given a gist of all the problems, and I like your idea of original sin of inequality and the problems which are arising due to what we call disruption in supply chain. On the one hand, there's a global interdependence. On the other hand, how that interdependence is adversely affecting the situation presently. And then, of course, the negative growth all around the world, the socio-cultural shift, tourism, which has been affected very badly, and of course, the responsible consumption, the idea of responsible consumption is very, very important because the environment is a very great challenge of modern time. So thank you very much for your very scholarly ideas. Now I would like to request Ambassador Shambhu Ram Simkhada. I see he is present here and would like to request Your Excellency to present your views on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Gupta. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to be participating in this very significant, very important discourse on an institution that we all hope will become very effective in bringing the member states together in some of the challenges that all of us face. But when you talk about regional politics in the post-COVID-19 era, the first thing in my mind is the uncertainty on the very nature, the causes, and ultimately the consequences of this pandemic. Even today, we talk about the vaccine. There's a great bit of uncertainty on the efficacy of the vaccine itself. So as a result, what we need to keep in mind is to be able to be prepared for the uncertain consequences that this pandemic is going to bring to our societies. Already in many ways fragile. And when I participate in this kind of discussion on what is now internationally being talked about as the post-COVID-19 world order, the question that strikes me in my mind is the dilemma between the two. One is to rush back to the same old order before the pandemic, and in a way, what brought the pandemic. And of course, the second is the need to reflect on what you would call a new normal. For instance, the distinguished professor was talking about the responsible consumption. When you talk about responsible consumption, and when I was talking about the very cause, what is it that compelled human beings to consume every other creation of God or Mother Nature, whatever you call it, including bats, which we are told is the reason how the whole pandemic began. What caused that? And that reminds me of a very old saying of Mahatma Gandhi, where he said, voluntary control of needs. And that is what responsible consumption is. That in fact, because you are able to do it, that you do not devour every other creation of nature, whether you call it animate or inanimate. In fact, our whole knowledge of what constitutes matter is changing. Many things that we thought were inanimate, in fact, are the source of energy. How does nuclear energy come out? So as a result, there is a whole range of uncertainty on which we have based our assumptions of our theories as well as our practices. So I see the need, in fact, for us to re-examine many of these set of assumptions on which we have created theories of politics, economics, security, and even science, and on the basis of which we are getting used to a certain stereotype of practice, whether it's in the exercise of power, whether it's the governance of nation states, or whether it is inter-individual behavior of human beings. So unless we have the ability, the will to reflect and in fact re-examine this set of assumptions, things may remain business as usual. And that's my worry. And that is what brings me back to the topic, the institution that we're talking about, called BIMSTEC. When Ambassador Gupta was reading out the data on BIMSTEC, the number of countries, the percentage of global population, the GDP, absolutely correct. It's an important reason. But it's even more important today because for a long time, I have been arguing that in fact the old global epicenter from Europe has moved to Asia. And even among Asia, South Asia, the Bay of Bengal, and the Central Himalayas. These are today one of the most critical global epicenters and the Indian Ocean as a whole. The epicenters of global politics, economics, security, and science. And as a result, that underlines two important things. One is the idea of the need for us to reflect on a new normal. Nature of behavior from the individual to our institutions like BIMSTEC or SAARC or ASEAN. And of course, the most important institution human mind has created so far, called the institution of nation states. So unless there is a will to recognize this need for transformation, for a change, I'm afraid we have COVID-19 today. We had COV, coronavirus 1. Now we have COV2. And if we don't change our behavior, what is the guarantee that tomorrow, sometime in the future, there will be even more powerful virus than COV2? And of course, even a greater pandemic than this one. So that sort of underlines the need for us also to look at the institution of BIMSTEC from that perspective. And that brings me to the idea that BIMSTEC is defined as a bridge between SAARC and ASEAN. And whenever I participate in meetings of BIMSTEC, one question that strikes my mind is what is it that forced us to think of a new institution to bridge between two institutions that are already in existence? SAARC on one side and ASEAN on the other side. Now we say that SAARC is in action. So obviously, if SAARC cannot move forward, the initiative to activate BIMSTEC is the right one. But the subsequent question I keep asking in all of these forums is, unless we are able to redress the same dilemmas that have turned SAARC into a dysfunctional institution that it is today. In fact, just before this meeting, I have been talking to another forum about the idea of the SAARC Ministerial Conference the customary ministerial conference that took place every year during the UN General Assembly. Even that is today uncertain. So what is it that made SAARC so dysfunctional that we had to think of coming out and in fact inviting some of the members of ASEAN to come together into this new institution called BIMSTEC? There are three fundamental issues that I briefly want to talk about. One is the whole idea of regional organization is an outcome of the dysfunctionality of the larger international institutions that were thought of in the post-World War II era. Because the classical international relations based on the traditional power and state centricity created the devastations of the two world wars. And as a result, the leaders of that generation, cognizant of the pain that mankind suffered as a result of those wars, thought of a new institution that would lead the world to change the behavior of human beings at all three levels. At the level of individuals, as we talked about consumption, at the levels of institutions, the question of governance, whether it's governance within nation states or the need for a larger global governance. And third, of course, the behavior of the institution of nation state. So that is why the whole idea was that we would transform into a new global culture of collective security, collective prosperity, and collective dignity, as enshrined in the three layers, institutional layers of the UN. The Security Council for Peace and Security, the Economic and Social Council for Prosperity and Development, and of course the Human Rights Commission, now Human Rights Council, to preserve the human dignity, that all human dignity needs to be respected. What scholars found out is it did not work. Because of the Cold War, the idea of collective security, collective prosperity, and collective dignity became hostage. So scholars thought of an idea called regional cooperation, that in fact, if that notion of interstate cooperation could be brought down to a more manageable level at the regional level, that there would be greater economic cooperation, cooperation in trade, and cooperation in security. That is how the idea of regional cooperation emerged. But what do you have today? The same replication. Why? Because that behavior has not changed, either individually, institutionally, and in terms of the behavior of the nation state. So that dilemma confronts SAARC, but that same dilemma in a way confronts BIMSTEC. I'm glad that the fourth SAARC BIMSTEC summit in Kathmandu has identified this indirectly, and as a result focused on the institutional side, the need for the institutional strengthening of BIMSTEC. A lot of work is being carried out right now. But there too, I would like to underscore the need for what I call transformation from the classical narrow national interest to an idea of a collective regional interest, national interest fulfilled through the collective regional goal, regional interest. So unless that transformation can take place, and if every country start to look at all things, all perspective from the classical notion, then I'm afraid there is not much possibility to be too optimistic about. There has to be a national interest harmonization process. But how does that come about? One is, of course, the political will. I've recently made a comparative study of the 4 regional organizations: BIMSTEC, SAARC, ASEAN, and European Union. And what clearly demonstrates is the importance of that institutionalization process. The European Union today is the most advanced form of regional cooperation, to the extent of leading the European nations, even to the point of sharing partly sovereignty in some sense. And that, in fact, is the reality. Because today there are a number of problems like environment, like transborder crime, drugs, pandemics, which can be better addressed through regional cooperation. And that national interest harmonization is in fact the role of the secretariats, the institution, in international relations parlance called collective legitimization of individual national interest. So everybody's interest is covered within the collective regional interest. And that role is most effectively played by the leader of the institution. So in this comparison between EU, ASEAN, SAARC, and BIMSTEC, what I find is one is the political will of the leadership to cooperate. And of course, on that, there are different debates as to what motivates individual nation states to cooperate with each other. Is it technological? It is technical, economic, environmental, or is the larger issue of politics and security also very important? That consideration is, I think, very important. That is the mistake I think SAARC leaders continue to make, in the sense that making SAARC only a limited institution on economics. But experience shows that unless there is also understanding on the other issues, that in fact, it would make much more sense for countries to trade, but they still don't trade. Why? Because of other issues. SAARC inter-regional trade is less than 5%. ASEAN, I believe, is around 20%. EU is almost 70%. Why? Because there is greater understanding politically that in fact it is more advantageous to trade regionally. So if I'm so delighted that the Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka also is among the speakers. The next summit is taking place in Sri Lanka. And of course, Sri Lanka can take a very leadership role. In many ways, they have done it. Of course, in consultation with other members. The most important member of the region, India, under which initiative the BIMSTEC has been, in a way, revitalized. If this can be, there can be a debate on how we can learn from the experiences of the past in really making BIMSTEC an effective organization, then I think there is a great opportunity for this region to move forward within the framework of this new institution that we all hope will become an effective organization for regional cooperation in not just the 14 areas of cooperation that have been identified so far, but in fact much more. But for that, I think we need a lot of homework. And this debate is very important in the sense that it has come at this time. And I was very impressed by the introductory remark that, that Ambassador Gupta made. And I hope we can continue with the discussion subsequently. Thank you very much and namaskar.
Thank you very much, Excellency. It has been great honor to listen to your very profound speech. You have raised very fundamental questions. And let me say that I like them very much. You talked about Mahatma Gandhi and the concept of responsible consumption, how we can contain the environmental problem through this process. That is very dear to my heart. And I take this liberty that I have written a book called Limits of Consumption. And this is primarily, this was published in 2018. This was written by me, inspired due to the degradation of environment, which you so nicely talked about in your opening remarks, that we don't even leave the other species of life alive anymore. And as a result, we are facing this pandemic today. Then you talked about, the idea of the nation state on the one hand and the global stage on the other hand, and in the middle we have these regional organizations, because at the global stage we have failed to evolve a collective security and prosperity architecture, and that is why we have worked in the last say 4 decades on a variety of regional institutions. And of course I fully agree with you that the EU has been the most successful of the regional institutions around the world, and followed by many others. But so far, our institutions have not been very successful. I'm sure the BIMSTEC is moving in the right direction and will actually move forward and become an example of regional institutions in the world. I'm sure about that. So let's hope the political will convert this institution into a more effective institution and things will move forward. And then you talked about the Bay of Bengal and the Himalayan region being the center of ancient civilization. I fully agree with you. I think we have to bring it back in the motion through cultural context, through civilizational context, and through people-to-people contact. So thank you very much, Your Excellency. It was a pleasure to hear to your profound views. Thank you. And now we have Dr. Niloy Ranjan Biswas, Associate Professor, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka, Bangladesh. Professor Niloy Biswas, we are all looking forward to your scholarly views on the subject.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gupta, distinguished advisor. I also would like to extend my sincere thanks to the organizers, Tillotoma Foundation, and nice to invite me to say a few words in this August gathering. I consider this as a great opportunity as well. Indeed, I have learned significantly from respected previous speakers. And particularly, I'd like to extend the discussion which so nicely has been discussed by Ambassador Shambhu Simkhada, particularly about the necessity of regional organization in the post-Second World War world. And he rightly mentioned about the failure of international organizations, the reasons of collective national interest, and the reason why state-based regional organizations have emerged during that time, which has still been continuing with significant amount of modifications in the nature of membership status, institutionalizations, mandates, their interventions, so on and so forth. The way how I'd like to formulate my argument, if I may like to say in that way, is how we can envisage BIMSTEC in the ongoing pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic era. And although the title is post-COVID, but I personally is quite skeptical to see that when actually we are going to have a post-COVID situation. I'm not pessimistic, but I still think that COVID-19 will be an ongoing reality. So having a post-COVID will be a little difficult to think right at this moment. But I appreciate, and I wanted to formulate my argument with the idea that is it the idea, a conventional idea of protectionism that often regional organizations tries to promote will help BIMSTEC to achieve what it would like to achieve in the COVID time, in the pandemic era, or even in the post-pandemic in future? Or are we really thinking about a trans-regional solidarity? Because I slightly twist the word from collective interest, because the reason why I'd like to explain is that collective interest also offers an impression of only or exclusively state-based cooperation. Now, I clearly put myself in a position where I'd like to say that the reason why regional organizations were initiated in the post-Second World War, and as it has been rightly mentioned by Ambassador Simkhada, was perfectly all right. But still now, if we continue with that idea, we might end up with situations where we will only find regional institutionalism based on the states. Nevertheless, we are also talking about other actors. So there is a horizontal and vertical proliferation, which is both actor-wise and theme-wise proliferation when we talk about regional cooperation. So we consider civil societies, we consider people-to-people cooperation, and we consider cooperation on public health issues. We consider wide areas of connectivity. Now, this is the basis of my understanding, the way how I would like to offer or I'd like to argue that what should be the way or nature of regional cooperation in future, particularly when we are talking about a trans-regional cooperation. I'd like to identify BIMSTEC as a trans-regional organization rather than a sub-regional one, and I have my own explanation for that. Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that in the Q&A if someone would like to ask why so. But I see that this is a bridge between two established region, so it is more a trans-regional format than a sub-regional one. So yes, BIMSTEC, and rightly from the two previous speakers, we have learned that how BIMSTEC has been evolved. Ambassador Gupta has very efficiently mentioned the history, the ups and downs, the prospects and challenges that BIMSTEC has faced. So I'm not going to reiterate that. But the major issue is, it is high time to consider that what should be the future mandates of this organization if it really wants to establish its footstep to improve not only the economic development or growth of its member countries, but also the socio-cultural and holistic understanding of the growth of the people of this region, particularly the member countries and also its neighbors. So the first idea is, why the member states would like to cooperate. My understanding is we have already understood that the COVID-19 pandemic is presenting an unprecedented amount of challenges. Challenges not only that it hampers or it would like to hamper the future growth of the countries. Dr. Jirayudh has very interestingly and very efficiently mentioned about how it has affected the economy of Thailand, not only Thailand, of course, all the member states of this organization, but at the same time, it is quite significant that it has a trickle-down impact on the lives of the human being, the socio-cultural aspects, and it would have a long-term impact of the human development patterns that would definitely impact the achievement of the state so far as the markers or the goals of the sustainable development goal set by the United Nations. So it is important for us that BIMSTEC may need to slightly rephrase its own mandates out of those 17 areas that BIMSTEC has already identified, and think that how it would like to cooperate. Is it only sufficient to just consider the ministers, the state officials, and to formulate policies that it would like, or there is a necessity to include wide range of actors in the policy making and in the interventions to to make it happen. Now, so far as the position of Bangladesh is concerned, I'd like to spend a minute or so to explain that Bangladesh is a pioneer of regional cooperation in the South Asian region, broadly in Asia as well. It is one of the proponents of SAARC. It has always been a forerunner of any regional, sub-regional, and trans-regional initiative that has been taken in order to facilitate the conventional economic growth and also non-conventional, relationship so far as the region is concerned. Even in the recent meeting commemorating the 23rd anniversary of the establishment of BIMSTEC, our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has mentioned, that BIMSTEC should provide an excellent platform to combat the devastating impact of COVID-19. She mentioned, quote, we should not leave any stone unturned to utilize this platform in addressing the challenges of the post-COVID era, unquote. So clearly, I mean, from the state side, from the political will of the state, so far as the Bangladesh is concerned, and I also have noted the statements of the other state leaders of the member states, I think, for BIMSTEC, there is a strong political will to carry forward the existing framework. Nevertheless, the question is whether the existing framework of cooperation of trans-regional platform or institution is sufficient to tackle a pandemic like COVID-19, when we clearly understand that this is not going anywhere soon. Now, I would like to identify 2 or 3 sectors, which I think is very important. Nevertheless, all the 15 or 17 sectors that BIMSTEC identifies is very important. But because there is a time constraint, I'd probably highlight particularly public health services and discourse. Now, BIMSTEC has included public health services as one of its very core area of interest. But my proposition is, and particularly to address the issues of COVID-19 and pandemic of this kind for the future reference, I think it is important for us to highlight certain areas of cooperation, the way how we would like to enhance skilled manpower. Pandemic has really, pointed the problems in our health sector. Despite the fact, Thailand and India, we have 2 countries in the BIMSTEC, forum, which are really significant, which have done significant development in the health sectors. Despite that, India's, the number says, India is severely affected. Thailand was also one of the, affected countries in the Southeast Asian regions when it started, particularly after February. So it is high time that BIMSTEC should have a proper institutional cooperation, both formally and also along with the professionals, that is the health sector experts, the vaccine experts, the service providers, to create skilled manpower through creating institutions, whether it can be, medical colleges and so on and so forth, and create particularly, targeting the crisis of pandemic. Second, I think, which is very important, and there are scholars who are talking about it, that we need to start a telemedicine center, and BIMSTEC is a perfect platform for this. In fact, with the help of the experience that Thailand has, state-of-the-art, medical system, India has also a very significant and developed medical facilities in South Asia. So with those experiences, I think, all the people of this region, and particularly BIMSTEC forum, should not be deprived of the state-of-the-art medical facilities of India and Thailand, particularly not only about the cure or treatment, but also about the prevention strategies. I think this is very important. So education about the health system is very important. We are lacking that. Even if we have medical colleges, we have hospitals and all that, but life skills, health and hygiene situations, how to avoid a pandemic, what should be done in a lockdown situation. So pandemic is not a one-time phenomenon in our life. And it will probably, even if the vaccine comes, the people are talking about there are multiple narratives about vaccines. So we need to consider a pandemic is an ongoing situation and consider significant public health discourse from the platform of BIMSTEC. My last point about the health discourse is this: we need to really build ourselves on alternative medicines. I know, modern scientific medicines is very important, but both India and Thailand have histories of using alternative medicines, which is Ayurveda, which is, homeopathies, and the local traditions, which have, there might be arguments between communities regarding the effectiveness and uses of that, but we cannot rule out the significance of this knowledge, and which have effectiveness in creating awareness and prevention, particularly in tackling these issues. I know economic growth, the second point that I wanted to mention is very important, and connectivity. These are two very linked. And I really appreciate one of the previous speakers have mentioned that a regional organization which is only based on hardcore economic growth cannot sustain. We cannot just replicate the European experiences in the context of Asia. We need to contextualize this. Our nation state, the way it has been formed historically, is quite different. So when we are talking about economic growth or infrastructural development, we need to consider people's perspective. We need to consider the history of our own region. And we cannot just only develop big bridges, dams, roads, and think that it will automatically trickle down in the economic growth of our country. Just think about, the migrants of the situations of the migrants in pandemic time in India, Bangladesh, in many Asian countries. I'm not only talking about migrants who have traveled to Middle East and come back and faced all the difficulties, but migrants from within our countries. The way how they have faced crises when lockdown have started, and the crisis of returning to their home cities or villages. Of course, when we are talking about infrastructural development, we need to take into consideration the subalterns, the people who are the actual wage earners and contributing in the economies of this country and in this region. So when we are talking about connectivity, when we are talking about infrastructural growth, we need to consider these people's perspective and how that can be translated into a regional development processes under the BIMSTEC. Tourism and hospitality is the third sector that I would like to identify. We have fantastic countries with scenic beauties in this region that includes Nepal, Bhutan, Thailand, India, Bangladesh, not at the par of these countries, but still is reliant on, to some extent, on tourism. So these sectors are also important, and these are included in the BIMSTEC agenda. But so far as now, I think we haven't really experienced a concrete trans-regional plan how to facilitate this. Now, this has been affected due to pandemic quite significantly. So the BIMSTEC leadership should definitely take into consideration that how all these countries can share and exchange their information, and to facilitate the tourism industry and hospitality industry, which will definitely create not only the employment for the young people of this region, but also develop the areas which has been affected both due to health conditions, pandemic, and also infrastructure. Now, the area, my fourth area, which is actually the area where I do studies and research, is the security, counterterrorism, and the issues of law enforcement and security institutions. That is one of the important areas, and I have been following since pandemic. In fact, I was writing a paper. Commission paper for Vivekananda International Foundation on particularly how pandemic and security cooperation under BIMSTEC will unfold in the future time. Now, there are two narratives, and one narrative is that non-state armed groups, violent extremist groups, terrorists, will they stop their activities due to are they kind of pessimist about their activities during the pandemic? So some said yes. but my studies and other scholars have identified that pandemic has actually accelerated some of their activities quite significantly. So cooperation, trans-regional cooperations in counter-violent extremism, counter-terrorism, transnational organized crimes are quite significant. The way how these rogue groups are actually exploiting pandemic is by spreading fake narratives regarding pandemics. They are actually creating their own space to recruit, train, and in fact creating different narratives as well. Sometimes they're even found in the region of Asia to fill in the void that has been created by the state because of their own inability to provide services due to pandemic. These groups have created or tried to create a public sympathy that about the state failures. So So BIMSTEC countries, BIMSTEC member states should really consider these as one of their very important areas of cooperation during the pandemic and the post-pandemic as well. There are quite a few significant, developments regarding the security areas, particularly in the areas of transnational organized crimes and counterterrorism. But it should be continued as well because cooperations in the security areas has also often generated political will among the states for cooperation, which we probably have lacked in the other platforms of South Asia, which is SAARC. Finally, I'd like to identify 3 or 4 challenges that is holistic or overall, I think, which is very important, and we should definitely keep in mind that state-based regional connectivity will not survive for a long time. When we give an example of European Union, yes, the primary membership relies into the state. We understand that, but European Union has extended and accommodated plethora of civil societies, individuals, epistemic communities, non-governmental organizations, experts, and they have given significant amount of work responsibilities to these actors, which have contributed significantly in the development of regional organizations. If we can't do that, BIMSTEC will struggle a lot, particularly in tackling some of the issues that I have discussed and my previous respected speakers have discussed as well. We need to think about, yes, there are always 1 or 2 significant countries who will bear the torch in front, who are the torch bearers, who would lead the processes. Nevertheless, one country-led regional platform cannot also sustain for a long time. And this myth has to be deconstructed somehow, that it is either India or Thailand, and BIMSTEC is their project or something like that. Sometimes we get these narratives, and there are also media or some sources which may exploit this idea or narratives, which need to be deconstructed as well. And that can only be deconstructed when all the member states will have or will feel the responsibility to carry forward the objectives and mandates of the regional organization. And of course, the powerful states or the developed states, member states within this platform will facilitate this process. We cannot avoid the significance of extra-regional power. China, BRI, the issues are discussed, and these will be discussed always. But we need to consider that when we are talking about BIMSTEC or a regional platform, the level of cooperation cannot be confined within only the member states. There have to be collaboration and extension of cooperation beyond the platform as well. So BIMSTEC ASEAN has to collaborate. BIMSTEC SAARC has to collaborate. BIMSTEC European Union has to collaborate. The way how BIMSTEC has been facilitated by Asian Development Bank in doing several studies, it has to be extended with World Bank, European Union, SAARC, and ASEAN as well. So there has to be a trans-regional cooperation as well with other platforms. Otherwise, there will always be a silo kind of a confinement which might restrict the progress of the regional organization, particularly to address issues like pandemic. Again, a pandemic is not a region specific, is not a country specific. There has to be diffusion of cooperation. So I'd like to finish by quoting one particular idea which Parag Khanna has mentioned quite significantly, that connectivity needs to be replaced by the idea of connectography. And connectography cannot be confined within the member states only. It has to be expanded on the basis of need. It has to be contextualized to face the nature of the threats, particularly in the context of pandemic or tackling pandemic. I think BIMSTEC needs to horizontally and vertically expand its idea of connectivity to connectography so that it can establish new institutions, it can include new actors who are experts on the subject matter and are willing to extend the cooperation beyond the confined statist model of regional cooperation. And obviously people-to-people connectivity is must. Without that, we cannot extend our cooperation for future. I really thank you for this opportunity. And if there are any questions in the Q&A or observations, I'd be happy to note down that. Thank you again, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niloy, Ranjan, Biswas. I think you have given very good practical ideas. First of all, let me confirm you are right that Bangladesh has been in the forefront of regional organizations. I was in Bangladesh when the SAARC was set up. The first summit took place in 1985. So I can tell you with my own experience that yes, Bangladesh has been promoting regional cooperation in a variety of ways. And now you have the Secretariat of BIMSTEC, so that is another evidence that you have contributed to the regional cooperation in a variety of ways. I also agree with you that the trans-regional solidarity is one of the ideas of this organization. Yes, it is. It is between SAARC and ASEAN. It is between South Asia and Southeast Asia. So this is it's a bridge between the trans-regional solidarity, and that is what is needed. I agree with you that we need better trained health workers. The health infrastructure has been exposed because of this pandemic, and this is time that we try and strengthen this very, very significant area of human development in a very cooperative and coordinated way. I think BIMSTEC can play a very important role, and so is the course of alternative medicines. I have personal faith in alternative medicines because I don't believe in too much in allopathic medicine. I believe that if you can monitor your food and your daily routine and your herbs, you can be healthy. Like I have hardly in my life I have taken any allopathic medicine. So I can tell you that it can be very, very healthy alternative to human health. And then, of course, I also agree with you that no one country can dominate. It has to be a cooperative enterprise. All countries have to participate. The connectivity has to improve. So thank you very much for your very, very practical ideas. I have been able to educate myself a little more with your very, very, what you call well-researched ideas on the subject. So thank you very much. And now we are going to listen to Professor Lipi Ghosh, Professor and Director, Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies, University of Calcutta, India. Professor Lipi Ghosh, yes. Thank you very much. You are welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I must thank the organizers. Am I properly audible? I hope I'm audible. Okay. So
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Fine. Okay. In fact, first of all, I must say today in Kolkata, my place, internet connection is not very good. So in case of any problem, I may put my video off. So anyway, let me start. First, respected Ambassador Gupta, fellow panelists, I extend my sincere thanks to the organizers like Tillotoma Foundation and NICE of Kathmandu, Nepal, for extending me this opportunity to speak in this platform. In fact, what I am going to speak before you today, that is part of my one ongoing research on this tourism in context of BIMSTEC. So I have identified only one area of cooperation of BIMSTEC, that is tourism. And my paper is entitled like Politics of Tourism and BIMSTEC, Post-COVID Prospects and Challenges. In fact, politics of tourism, as we know, that it is an important subject of very recent research. And we know that political will sometimes take certain decisions and policies which directly or indirectly affects the tourism industry. And politics of tourism goes beyond boundaries, especially when there is sub-regional, or as Dr. Biswas says, trans-regional. I definitely like the term, and I would have a question for Dr. Biswas also. Trans-regional, cross-border geographical linkages. And we know that in the BIMSTEC, there are 7 countries pervading South and Southeast Asia. And when we talk about politics of tourism in COVID period and in context of BIMSTEC, we must understand that how the people-to-people relation has been arrested, weakened, and what should be the future policies or future modalities. So tourism has an important component, that is cultural tourism. And my project, my broad project, what I am working on, that is especially about the cultural tourism and heritage architecture. And in context of all the 7 countries, we can identify one common cultural tourism, that is the issue of Buddhist circuit. All these BIMSTEC countries have places of interest pervading to Buddhism. And that way we see that when we come to the question of travelers and this kind of cultural tourism sector, we see that travelers can learn culture of different people. So against this background, this paper is going to focus on the importance of cultural tourism in BIMSTEC. And in fact, the paper is divided broadly into 2 parts, that is the different points of heritage architecture, etc. That I will not go into detail, but the second part is more important for today's this discussion program, that is issue of perspective, cooperation and challenges in the COVID and post-COVID period. But to very briefly talk about the first part, that is the heritage culture and Buddhist monuments. What I see that Buddhist heritage culture are found in Buddha Gaya, Varanasi and Tripura. In India, in context of Bangladesh, we know that we have in Dhaka, Chittagong and Paharpur is very important Buddhist site. Then we have Buddhist site in Nepal also, and heritage cultural monuments are there. The same is about Bhutan and also about Sri Lanka and Yangon, and Bangkok, as you know, is one of the very important vibrant center of Buddhism and Buddhist culture. And these monuments are symbols of historical events, and that way we see that reflections of history, culture, etc. in these monuments. Now we have to discuss that what happened during this pandemic period, how the COVID-19 could create disasters. Definitely the nature of relations between tourism system and BIMSTEC means that tourism has came to a standstill because of this small virus. We human beings, in spite of best of our civilizational credits, we are now at the in the hand of that virus only. And the disease's global reach and application of the classic disease control in the form of quarantine, reduced mobility and isolation had definitely a drastic impact on international and domestic tourism. And so what are the negative impacts? The tourism industry has been massively affected by the spread of coronavirus, as many countries have introduced travel restrictions or attempt to contain the spread. The United Nations World Tourism Organization estimated that global international tourism arrivals might decrease by 20 to 30% in 2020, leading to a potential loss of US $30 to 50 billion. In many of the world cities, planned travel went down to a large extent. So similarly, we see that in context of this BIMSTEC, in context of this pandemic, BIMSTEC countries and regions have also imposed quarantine, ban on travel, and restricted movement, stopped the international flights, etc. So these global restrictions, together with decreased willingness of people to travel, has definitely had, as we already discussed, there's a negative impact, economic impact in the travel sector. So not only the people-to-people contact has been suspended, but also economically, the travel sector as a service sector has came to a very weak situation. We see that foreign arrivals in India in March 2020 fell about 66.4% year on year. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, foreign travelers by March 2020 fell by 70.8% year on year. Thailand also had the same problem, and I'm mentioning only these three countries from the figurative point of view, because these are the very important points of Buddhist cultural heritage cultural span. So COVID-19 pandemic had a sudden and substantial impact on the cultural sector also, and art and cultural sector, because we see that with this COVID-19, everything, say museum, exhibitions, different events, performances were cancelled or postponed. So either at the domestic level or at the international level, not only tourism, but also the service sector came under many negative impacts. So following the rapidly evolving news of closures and cancellations across the world throughout February and March, up to April 2020, dates for reopening or expectation when cultural organism can fully return to normal. And now in India, we are telling, and India and in many other countries, we are telling that we are living the time of new normal. But in spite of new normal, although we are traveling at the domestic level, international travel is that way still arrested. And so when we are talking of BIMSTEC, we understand that this our cultural matrix is now at a very low ebb. So how to do it? When these are the negative impacts, what to do, how to recover, how we can get recovery from this situation. Here is important the policymakers and the BIMSTEC initiatives on a collaborative level. First step to recovery may be rebuilding consumer trust and confidence. This is very important because now people are scared to travel. Globally, in an effort to establish a harmonized approach towards settling guidelines around the reopening of the sector, WTTC launched the Safe Travel Stamp, quote unquote, Safe Travel Stamp, which has been designated to allow potential travelers to recognize establishment around the world, which has been adopted standardized health and hygiene protocols and backed by the United Nations World Tourism Organization, that is UNWTO. The stamp may be used across the travel. And here we can see that BIMSTEC may undertake their own policy to certify hotels, restaurant, airlines, cuisine fairs, tour operator, etc., etc. The second step is regional cooperation towards restoration. As the first step towards recovery, the possibility of establishing travel bubbles or corridor, which would allow South Asian countries to put in place protocols for opening up channels of air travel, etc. We see that the same would be necessary for Southeast Asian countries too. And we see that there was discussion among members of the Forum's Regional Action Group for South Asia to establish safe zones, and that way to adopt some policy where group of countries with similar recovery trajectories would be capable to travel and would be capable to travel in a safe way. And this model may be applied for BIMSTEC countries also along the trail of their cultural heritage tourism. The third step should be the niche tourism push. The World Economic Forum's Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report published in 2019 attributes natural and cultural diversity along with price competitiveness for the emergence of South Asia as an attractive tourist destination. But my argument is that this model, that is World Economic Forum's Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report model may not be applicable, may not be possible to apply at this point of time. But what we can do is that South and Southeast Asian countries, in fact, to foster the spiritual tourism circuit, could offer international traveler a well-marketed package within a safe uh, parameter of travel rules and regulations. And fourth is the long-term measures to build resilience. And this is very important, that we never know that how long this COVID-19 will continue, and even if the vaccine comes up, how long all people should be vaccinated, and how long this threat will remain. So the overall impact is that this group travel may we have to avoid, and that way we know that in the Buddhist circuit, especially in the Buddha Gaya and other places, even in Nepal, there were many group tourisms, and those may have to be arrested unless and until we follow some, or we invent some new policies. So finally, I would say that the uncertainty and related travelers' anxiety will be the hallmark of the travel, and that we have to overcome. And in the new age of tourism, in the post-COVID-19 period, given the varied recovery trajectories for countries across the world, reopening and revival strategies will have to be tailored by the different service sectors. And as we have already heard, that collective regional policy or collective sub-regional policy is very much important, and it should always keep a parity, a balance with the national policy, so that one country cannot blame the other country for any negative impact. And this way, the collective legitimization of any individual nation's policies at the collective forum, one individual nation's decision and policy should be recognized at the collective forum. And that way, perhaps the best policy will be the knowledge sharing regarding health, regarding travel, regarding food, regarding environment. And that way, perhaps we can again overcome these problems and come back to a normal life in near future, in post-COVID period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Lipi Ghosh. I think you have given very good ideas how to revive the tourism industry, which has been badly affected by pandemic. In fact, this is one industry, tourism, hotel and restaurants, which have been most severely affected by this pandemic. And it is important to revive this, to revive the overall economic framework of these nations. And it is also important to develop a new protocol for travel around the world, which is safe for the people. And it is, a new trust in the industry can be reposed only when you have this kind of protocol. So thank you very much, Professor Lipi Ghosh, with your very profound study on this particular subject. We were delighted to hear your views. Thank you. Now, I think we are still missing two of our distinguished speakers, and I do not see them on the list of participants yet. Will Yukta tell me what should we do? Should I summarize and move to the Q&A, or should we wait for some more time? Yukta?
Yes, yes. I think I have I have a presentation. So since two participants are missing, I think I also need to step in.
Okay. So then why don't you make your presentation?
Yes, yes, sure.
Yes. So that would be very nice. I think the Tillotoma Foundation will make its own views. And Yukta is a very dynamic young research, scholar. So let us hear her views on BIMSTEC post-COVID. Thank you, Yukta. Please.
Thank you, Ambassador. So shall I start? Yes. With the membership increasing from 4 countries initially to 5 and then 7 Asian countries, a lot of focus and attention has been captured by BIMSTEC. Since its inception, it has developed into a big and mature regional organization. The reason for increasing these member countries or to the increase in scope of the organization's work areas, which have moved from technical arenas like trade, communication, transport, to pressing issues like healthcare, counter-terrorism, climate change, and transitional crime too. Connectivity is a key enabler for robust regional cooperation. It is the very foundation in which the edifice of economic integration can stand upright. Were the words of Nepal's Prime Minister Oli on the 4th BIMSTEC summit held in Kathmandu in Nepal. The BIMSTEC member states vowed to enhance cooperation, railroad connectivity, people-to-people contact, and tourism, among others. In the cooperation, railroad connectivity, in the connectivity sector, as many as 160 projects have been identified at the cost of around $45 billion. Prime Minister Modi and India's Act East policy has taken up several connectivity projects, such as the Khaladam multi-modal transit transport project that will connect the Eastern India seaport of Calcutta with Setwin seaport of Myanmar. It would also help the northeastern states of India by opening up fresh arenas for economic activities. In his statement, Thailand Foreign Minister Kasid stated that apart from providing financial and technical assistance in the area of road construction, particularly along the Thailand-Myanmar-India road link, and fully supports the development of the river deep seaport in Myanmar, which will become a gateway through which the region can connect with traditional and emerging markets to the west of BIMSTEC. In the last 1 decade and a half, intra-BIMSTEC trade has grown slightly from 3.6% in 2002 to 24.3% in 2014, according to 4.3% according to a study by the RIS. According to them, the full potential of intra-regional trade remains on tap because of tariff and non-tariff barriers, poor communication, lack of people-to-people contact, poor transportation, lack of supply capabilities, and information gaps. The BIMSTEC countries have had top challenges with regard to energy security. There are countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar having large gas reserves, and Nepal and Bhutan with untapped potential for hydropower. The proximity and political location of the BIMSTEC countries are a boon endowed with rich resources and perfect contrast of climates. This can easily boost trade with efficient utilization and proper distribution of resources. Besides trade and commerce, terrorism and climate change have also added a new dimension to the prevailing engagement among the BIMSTEC nations. The 21st session of the BIMSTEC senior officials meeting was virtually held in Colombo in Sri Lanka, where Admiral Jayant Colombage had also attended. The foreign secretaries finalized some important legal instruments, including BIMSTEC Convention on Mutual Legal Assistance in Criminal Matters, Memorandum of Associations on the Establishment of BIMSTEC Technology Transfer Facility in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and Memorandum of Understanding on Mutual Cooperation between Diplomatic Academies Training Institute of BIMSTEC member states. So these legal instruments are envisaged to be signed at the 5th BIMSTEC Summit. The Charter of the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation is in the offing and is set to be placed before the member states before its summit next year, according to the head of the organization. In an interview at the BIMSTEC headquarters in Dhaka, the Secretary General Shahidul Islam told that after 2 years of extensive exercise, the draft charter was produced and was cleared for approval by the foreign secretaries of the member states earlier this month. The charter text will be placed for approval at the 5th BIMSTEC summit scheduled for January 2021, and it codifies the aims and purposes of the organization, its membership and decision-making process. He added with a note that BIMSTEC is gradually taking shape to deliver for which the member states first came together. In order to bring back focus in BIMSTEC's work, the foreign secretaries of the grouping recently rationalized the existing 14 sectors into 7 sectors: trade and investment and development, environment and climate change, security, agriculture and food security, people-to-people contact, science, technology and innovation, connectivity. The proposal will be placed before the next ministerial meeting to be held in Colombo early in January 2021. The tenure of the incumbent Secretary General Shahidul Islam for Bangladesh expires on September 20th. The tenure is for a non-renewable 3 years. Tenzing Lekpel has been nominated by the government of Bhutan as the next Secretary General of BIMSTEC. It is Bhutan's turn to nominate the Secretary General. BIMSTEC is an organization with massive potential. The member nations must identify the respective areas of strength, pool their abilities, and undertake common programs. People-to-people connection must be given adequate priority alongside government-to-government and business-to-business connections. Greater connectivity in the region is a crucial requirement. The development of the BIMSTEC region should remain a priority. I feel that BIMSTEC can progress rapidly as an organization in the coming years. It will be able to voice the aspirations of all the member nations and be the platform for collective action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yukta. You have actually summarized it very beautifully. You have done good research on the BIMSTEC cooperation and what is likely to come in the next, the 5th BIMSTEC summit. So thank you very much for giving this very happy news to all of us that the next summit will revitalize the organization in a very dynamic way. Now, I would like to summarize the points in a very short summary, and then we will open a Q&A for all those who are participating. Firstly, I would like to tell that the COVID or the coronavirus, which originated in Wuhan in December, January, has rewritten the entire economics, entire social interaction, entire medical sciences in the entire world. This is a path-breaking development which has surprised every human being in this world in the last 6 months. So we have to be ready for this problem. We don't know how long it will continue. We are talking about post-COVID, and I'm very hopeful that it will be over, but we don't know. The vaccine is on the way, but even those who claim that vaccine can help, even the same doctors are saying that it may not be a permanent cure to the problem, and the problem may continue. So we have to be ready for this. So the first thing we have to, within the BIMSTEC framework, we have to improve is the health and infrastructure, the institutions, the research framework, the training of personnel. All this area has to be taken on board so that we can improve the health environment for all the inhabitants of this region, which is 22% of the world population. I think that is very, very important. The second point is that the trade and supply lines have been disrupted because of transport problems, because of lockdowns all over the world, and because of the production systems have stopped in many countries. So as a result, those systems are they're coming back, and I'm sure the supply lines will be restored soon. but it will take a new normal now, because the supply lines will not be as they were 6 months ago. They will be rewritten. The whole system of transportation, the whole system of production are being undergoing new changes because of the COVID. So we have to keep that in mind. Then tourism and hotels, as Professor Lipi Ghosh mentioned, that it is very important. This has disturbed the economies of many countries. Countries like Thailand, which is so much dependent on tourism, has been badly affected because of this. So we have to find a new protocol for travel, for operation of international airlines, for the tourism sector. WTO has to come out with some sort of new rules which can govern this sector and navigate people through the international travel. The trust has to be restored. The individual should be ready to move and go back on their tourism trips abroad and within the country. Then, of course, the terror groups, as Dr. Niloy Biswas mentioned, the terror groups are not stopping. Even the virus has not stopped them. In fact, according to him, they have increased in number. So we have to, face this problem. We have to come together and put our strengths together and work against these groups. We have to improve connectivity. That is one important area. Without connectivity, we cannot improve trade. We cannot improve tourism, and we cannot have, even in case of disaster, we cannot reach the help to the poor, to the needy people who need the help. So connectivity is very, very important. And then, of course, the environment is very important. I personally believe that the environment remains the biggest challenge, and maybe to some extent this COVID has come out of the environmental disaster, because we are destroying all the species of life, and as a result some of these side effects are coming to fore, and they may come in a larger number. So we have to protect all the species. We have to have responsible patterns of consumption. That is very, very important. Energy security is a new challenge. Of course, in this area we have a lot of hydropower capacity, particularly in Bhutan, in Nepal, and we also have gas reserves in Bangladesh. So all that can be used for improving the energy security in the region. So I think I would like to highlight these areas which can be accelerated to improve the cooperation in this organization. Now, BIMSTEC is not a very large organization. It's comparatively small in terms of number of countries, and therefore the coordination should not be that complicated. I think we have to put together our resources. As somebody said, the political will is needed. Of course, that is very important. Political will is needed, resources are needed, and then we have to put the projects in place on the ground. So that is how I would like to summarize the discussion today. We of course missed two distinguished speakers, and the Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka and Mr. Yu Lapai Jogun from Myanmar. I wish they had come, but maybe they had some other engagement. They could not make it. We missed them. But now I would like to open the forum to questions. You can put your questions on the chart, or you can come up on the screen and raise it directly. Thank you. Now there are some questions. If you permit me, I can read them. There's a question from Facebook. How far sub-regional cooperative ventures can be effective if mutual hostility and threat perception prevails? Is pandemic bringing an environment conducive for reduction in or is it a catalyst to the hostility? Who would like to answer? Let me ask Dr. Jirayudh Sinthupan from Thailand if he can answer this question.
Okay. Yeah, from my point of view, I agree with with the ambassadors that the political will is very important, but before the political wills can operate, I think what the BIMSTEC countries should be focusing on is public diplomacy, in order to understand, in order to build the understandings among the populations, the peoples, of this transnational organizations, because because I think comparing to any other institutions like SAARC or the ASEAN, I think the BIMSTEC is is pretty much underrepresented in the public consciousness. So I think I think we have to build the to build the public understandings of these organizations, and also the goodwill among the peoples, in order for them to pressures the politicians to have a more concrete political will, which we can maybe started from a simple projects like health, sharing of best practices in health care system, health volunteers, and also to follow up with your concerns on the environment. And I think we may begin with having the understanding that BIMSTEC is not just the political entities, but it's also the environmental entities of the Bay of Bengals, and also the Himalayan hill tracts, and which is interconnected, and it is the same natural resources that that we all have to take care together in order to ensure the prosperities, and also the securities of our regions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now let me read out the next question. How BIMSTEC countries can be able to establish the good connection with each other after COVID-19? And is it possible to grow up the economic status by BIMSTEC countries during this difficult time? Let me request Ambassador Shambhu Simkhada to respond to this question. Excellency, if you are there, kindly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Excellency. A very, very pertinent question. In fact, one of the issues that keeps coming up in all of the BIMSTEC meetings, especially even in the realm of security, is this idea of connectivity and waterways. In the sense that, for instance, Nepal is a landlocked country. And as a result, if within the framework of this connectivity cooperation, if accessibility of all countries can be enhanced, I think that would be a very significant and a real sort of area of cooperation through which we can enhance our economic activity. In fact, this access to the sea itself makes Nepal one of the most high-cost economies. So as a result, this is perhaps an area from which we can, both in terms of inland waterways as well as access to the sea, would be one very concrete area which would allow people and also countries to interact more freely, and as a result help in the economic consequences that obviously COVID-19 is going to have on all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you so much. Now we will take the next question. Apart from improving health infrastructure, what could be other scientific cooperation activity to be taken by BIMSTEC member countries? May I request Dr. Niloy, Ranjan, Biswas to respond to this question. Dr. Biswas, are you there?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Ambassador Gupta. I very much like to answer that question, but before that, I think I'd like to also address one point. There was a question whether pandemic stops hostilities or it facilitates hostilities. There's part of the question before. I think if we see the history of pandemic, it doesn't give us a very optimistic picture in terms of pandemic influencing ongoing hostilities to be stopped. There are often scholars give the example of Spanish flu, which was taking place during the First World War or at the end of the First World War, and it didn't influence much so far as the global strategic, paradigm of that time. And within in fact, less than 3 decades, the world experienced Second World War. The point being, raised here is that people probably do not take a lesson from the pandemic and turn conflicts into peace. Even if you consider the contemporary pandemics or last 6 months, pandemic didn't really stop countries to start border skirmishes. I do not have exact data to support that whether the organized crimes have stopped due to pandemic or not, but there are quite significant examples, in fact, which says even if you consider violent extremist activities in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, so it's difficult to say that pandemic stops ongoing conflicts, it's difficult to say whether it facilitates or it increases the numbers, but the relations are quite hazy or blurred in this context. So that I wanted to flag as part of one of the questions which was asked before. The question now you have asked that scientific cooperation has been facilitated according to the existing mandate of the BIMSTEC. It has facilitated scientific experiments in all the 14 areas, which has scuttled down to 7. So I correct myself. So apart from the health issues that I mentioned is the priority area where scientific cooperation should be accelerated by the BIMSTEC member states and relevant epistemic communities. In addition to that, climate change is another area where I think BIMSTEC member states and the concerned organizations should definitely extend their cooperation. The second area that I'd like to say is the urban, the trends of urbanization and urban management policies, because this is the hub of the contemporary century. By this I mean like Asia. So if you consider the cities of India, Thailand, even Dhaka, Colombo, Kathmandu, so these cities are thriving. There is a significant issue in future that whether the conventional migration from rural to urban areas will continue to what extent, or we will also experience reverse migration, what we have experienced during this pandemic, that is from urban areas to cities. And is that because that urban management has not really been done properly? Therefore, I think this entire issue of urban migration or rural to urban migration or reverse migration will be a critical issue that will define the socio-cultural aspects during a crisis time or even a post-crisis time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very important. I think we saw this problem in India and Bangladesh and other countries as well, how millions of people had to migrate back from cities to the rural areas during the pandemic. So I think this is a very important issue where we can collaborate. Now we have one more question here. How do you strike a balance between sustainable development and globalization in the post-COVID era? And then let me combine this with the other question. That is how could we tackle the security threats along the porous border of Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar, where insurgents groups like NSCN stationed in the region? And I would request Ambassador Shambhu Simkhada to give his considered view on both these issues. Excellency.
I think he has left. He has
Yes.
left a message saying that
Okay.
he's caught up with other work.
Okay. Okay. So on sustainable development, who would be the?
So, sir, I have a question.
Okay.
Regarding the sustainable development goals. It would be
Yes.
okay. So, sir, so do you feel that when we talk about the sustainable development goals and to achieve it, the youth should play one of the major role in the upcoming post-COVID era in taking new initiatives to achieve the sustainable development goals apart from the government initiatives? Because I feel at times there are a lack of effort in the ground level from the government when we talk about achieving the sustainable development goals, because many people are not even aware in West Bengal about what exactly sustainable development goals.
So Professor Lipi Ghosh, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, actually, the person who asked the question is very much correct in terms of West Bengal, perhaps. But what we need to know that sustainable development means that something which, to put very simply, which can keep our life sustained, say like environment, pollution, water problem. These are the some basic things, and that way the one question, previous question was how sustainable development and global paradigm can match each other. I think we have still many things to learn, and not only in context of BIMSTEC but also in context of global policy paradigms. We need to understand everything, and we need to see that for our country, if we think in terms of our country of or our state, we need to think that what may be the suitable solutions, and that way we need to act. And the question was that if youth can play a role, definitely, because I believe that government only cannot do everything. Civil society has a great role to play, and that way different non-governmental organizations, different individuals, different academic institutions, different youth body, youth forum can definitely play their role. But it is true that they have to do something in conformity to a particular policy regulations. So that is my reply. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lipi Ghosh. I would just supplement on this issue a little bit. You see, if you look at sustainable development, what it means. Firstly, it means that we have to reduce per capita consumption, because the more you consume, the more minerals and metals you extract from the nature, the more you pollute, then the more you produce, and then again it goes as waste back to the nature. So that creates both the liquid and the solid waste. So this higher consumption means creation of additional waste in every respect. Firstly, taking out minerals. Secondly, refining them. Thirdly, in the form of production. Fourthly, after consumption, you have to discard them again. So this is a complete cycle, and therefore one of the fundamental problems with sustainable development is how to reduce consumption, how to moderate our consumption, how to bring the so-called consumerism to a more reasonable level. That is one question. And secondly, about the energy consumption, where a lot of steps have been taken to bring renewable energy into being. We have now wind energy, we have hydro energy, we have solar energy, which has to some extent helped in reducing this. And the third issue is recycling of waste, all the waste, particularly the plastics. And now that plastic has become one of the biggest issues in sustainability today. So I think these are some of the issues. I just wanted to mention this briefly. In addition, that there are issues of deforestation, issues of species which have become extinct. The whole ecosystem has been affected because of that. And because the deforestation is ultimately leading to what we call global warming. The temperatures are rising, and therefore you have erratic weather conditions all around the world, which we see everywhere. So all these, of course, this is a very big subject. We can't go into detail, but these are some of the issues I wanted to mention. And of course, the entire society, the youth have to play a much more important role, because they are the future pillars of the society, and they have to see that the world is safe for them and their children. So I would like to conclude the session now. If anybody has any more last question, we can take one more question, and then we will
Sir,
finish.
sir, I have one last question to
Yes.
Lipi ma'am. Ma'am, thank you for answering my question. This is Ritam Datta Chaudhary. I'm pursuing my studies from St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. I was also working with the tourism sector. So, ma'am, while working there for the tourism sector of West Bengal with the Kolkata police, ma'am, do you feel like India lacks the tourism security protocols when it comes to, for example, there are various remote areas which has a huge economic turnover when we consider tourism. But do you feel that the government lacks or the policing system lacks those security protocols which they should further initiate for the tourism growth of the country?
Professor Lipi Ghosh.
Was it specific to
This was specific to the tourism sector
in India, right? So I think
in India, but of course you can answer. There's no problem.
No,
The
I mean,
problems
my
are similar.
knowledge would be quite limited to particular that sector. So I don't know
Sir,
if it can be a little bit generalized.
Yes, sir. Sir, sorry for the interruption. Yes, sir, it would
No,
be great if you could present your views on the tourism sector in a very generalized manner. Maybe, for example, Bangladesh as well, so that I could learn from them and further improvise my studies accordingly.
one clear issue of developing conventionally the tourism sector is to avoid or to ignore the environment which was practiced conventionally by the state. Nevertheless, in the last few years, I think if I consider myself with the experience of Bangladesh as well, the government has quite significantly considered, environmental protection, impacts of greenhouse gases and climate change as part of or in general, like environment and impact assessment as part of the development of tourism sector as well. So yes, of course, I mean, it can be related with the idea of, controlling over consumption and make make this tourism industry sustainable as well, which will impact significantly to future generation. I think this is a struggling one because then you would definitely go into the interest areas, or there might be clash of interest between the big corporate houses who would like to make a significant amount of profits out of this industry vis-a-vis the moral and ethical standpoint of protecting culture, civilization, as well as environment. As I've said, I do not have enough specific knowledge to Indian tourism industry, but broadly what I have experienced here in Bangladesh is that this will be this is in fact, and this will be a significant matter of fact, because also we have some thriving, areas of tourism in certain areas, particularly along with the coast of the Bay of Bengal, Cox's Bazar and that area as well. But in our case as well, we have faced a very specific crisis in Cox's Bazar, which is the largest sea beach in Bangladesh, is also now the has hosted a significant number of more than 10 million number of refugees from Myanmar, the Rohingya refugees. So which is a unique crisis in South Asia. A significant tourist area is now a refugee, is now a refugee camp. In fact, one of the largest refugee camps in the world at this moment. So I'd like to stop here.
Thank you very much, Professor Niloy Biswas. I think you have touched upon another problem of the region, which is the Rohingya refugees.
Right.
So I think that is another problem we have to tackle within the confines of BIMSTEC. So I would like to conclude this session now. Before I conclude, I would like to thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, Research Director, Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, and of course, Yukta Acharya of Tillotoma Foundation for organizing this wonderful debate, very scholarly debate, which has been, in fact, liked by many people. I have seen some of the comments in the chat area, and many people have commented very positively on the debate which has taken place. So thank you very much for organizing this conference, and thanks to the learned scholars who presented their papers. They were very educative and they were very informative. I'm grateful to all of you for your support and your contribution to this conference. Thank you very much. And now I would hand it over.
Thank you. Tillotoma Foundation is an academic and cultural organization that works globally. It is engaged principally in international relations, financial, economic, environmental, scientific, strategic, and defense policy. The foundation has organized several international and national conferences, sessions, and conclaves over the last couple of years. The foundation supports and promotes youth activities, events, and cultural activities. We have worked extensively on Central Asia, West Asia, and Southeast Asia policy issues. Tillotoma Foundation organized the International Conference on Regional Politics and Strategy in Southeast Asia on 30th of June 2020. Tillotoma Foundation organized the International Conference on Southeast Asian Geopolitics, Conflict Resolution, and Maritime Issues on 7th July 2020. Tillotoma Foundation organized one of the most comprehensive and high-profile panels on Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region, with distinguished panelists from six stakeholders countries, including the former Commander-in-Chief of the Andaman and Nicobar Joint Command, the present Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, Director of the East-West Center, Washington, and the Vice Chairman of the Myanmar Economic Association, in the form of the International Panel on Is Indian Ocean the Next Focus of Chinese Velocity? On 3rd August 2020. In Southeast Asia Studies, Professor Baladash Ghoshal, Secretary General of the Society for Indian Ocean Studies, is a distinguished advisor, Indian Ocean and Southeast Asian Studies. In strategic aspects, Mr. Jitendra Kumar Ojha, former Joint Secretary, Government of India, is a distinguished fellow of the Foundation and head of the Strategic Studies Division of Tillotoma Foundation. Tillotoma Foundation has organized a weekly segment called Strategic Insights Sessions on issues across the world for 7 weeks. Tillotoma Foundation has also worked on science and environmental policy. We organized the international session on insights on environmental conservation on 25th July 2020. Globally, Dr. Anna Velekaya is our honorary convener for Russian Federation, and Mr. Siswanto Razdi is the honorary convener for Indonesia. Excellencies and friends, I thank you all for joining this international conference titled BIMSTEC and Sub-Regional Politics in Post-COVID Era, Relevance and Emerging Trends, organized by Tillotoma Foundation and Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, and making this a success. I especially thank today's distinguished speakers, Ambassador Shambhu Ram Simkhada, Professor Lipi Ghosh, Dr. Jirayudh Sinthupan, Dr. Niloy Ranjan Biswas. I want to thank Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, Distinguished Advisor, Tillotoma Foundation, for chairing today's panel and coordinating the erudite discussion. Let me also thank Dr. Jaiswal and Mr. Karki from the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. I must sincerely thank Mr. Soham Das, Chairman and Director, Tillotoma Foundation, for his support, guidance, and formulating the theme of this conference. We look forward to hosting more such discussions on issues of regional and global importance. It was a pleasure to host all of you today. Thank you and goodbye.